3 years ago, we lost. We lost friends. We lost family. We lost a part of ourselves. But even worse, we lost equity in our comic book collections. Some comics went from $2 million down to a measly $1 million. And no, I'm not talking about Dark Hawk #1. That book never goes down in value. I'm talking about one of the biggest books of all time, one of the biggest golden age grails there is out there in the comic book market. I'm talking about Superman #1 that just had the absolute worst comic book flip that I think there's ever been in the comic book collecting market. And so in this video, we got to talk about the story, talk a little bit about this sale, and also talk about an Action Comics #1 that also lost equity on its sale, and then ultimately talk about what is going on in the comic book market. And then later on in the video, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in the macro market, with the current state of the Federal Reserve, what they decided to do with the interest rates, and then talk about what I've been iterating kind of on this channel whenever we've been doing our index videos, which is, of course, this idea that Q3 and Q4 might be a little bit tougher. But before I get into it, if you guys could drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, doing those things, I'd appreciate it. And let us get into this video here today. Now, Superman #1, CGC 7.0, one of the highest grade copies on the census, just sold the other day at Goldin Auctions for a whopping $1.62 million. That is a large amount of money to spend on some old paper, and as you can see, 18 bids for maybe interested parties. At least, I'm going to guess that 18 bids means, could be any number of, people that were actually bidding on this. But, let's say there were at least a handful, maybe 10 or so that were interested in this book. Now, $1.6 million, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, swag, that's a lot of money. I would love to have $1.6 million for a comic book sale. Well, there's only one problem with that, because if you were the person who had this Superman #1 in a CGC 7.0 and you sold it for $1.6 million, you would have actually lost $1 million, because it wasn't too long ago that if you go into the census over here and you look up the 7.0 grade, you go back to 2021 on Comic Connect, that this CGC 7.0 with the QES sticker sold for $2.6 million, $1 million less. And now you're thinking to yourself, well, perhaps this copy was a much better looking copy. Well, unfortunately, that was not the case, because not only is it not a much better looking copy than the one that just recently sold, it is actually the same copy. As you guys can see from the serial number 394-528, 4001, we go over here and what do we see? 394-528, 4001, the same exact Superman 1 in a 7.0 went up for sale just 2 years after it was bought in 2021, meaning that unless this book has changed hands in the private market, I'm assuming that the same person who bought it had to sell it, had to liquidate. Maybe they are on tough times given the state of the current economy, and unfortunately lost $1 million in their comic book portfolio, comic book equity. I mean, and to make matters even worse, I mean, it's even more than that, right? Because they bought it for 2.6. They got to pay taxes on that. Who knows what the shipping is? I got to assume that the shipping costs for a $2.6 million comic book is probably more than the entirety of my comic book collection, put all together. And then not only that, when they sold it on Goldin Auction, they had to take, an auction fee off of their sale. So they're really in, they really had even a bigger loss than $1 million. And that is pretty unfortunate to see. And it was interesting, shout out to Josh's Comics, Aaron, who runs the great Instagram account. He's always doing comic book reports and kind of made me aware of the sale. And there was a lot of people out there in the Instagram space having this discussion in the comic book market, asking themselves the question, what happened? What happened out there? Now, a lot of people are blaming Goldin Auctions. A lot of people are saying, hey, Goldin Auction is just, you shouldn't be selling there, because it's just, they do a bad job marketing your book, or they're not a comic auction house first. Therefore, you should have gone to whatever the other comic places are, Comic Connect or Heritage or whatever the case. I mean, hell, even, some people out there were saying like even eBay would have been better than that. But I mean, guys, this is Superman #1. I mean, there's only so many Superman #1s. The book speaks for itself. If the Golden Age comic books are recession proof, if comic books are recession proof, seems like it shouldn't have mattered what auction house you sell it for if the book is just that much in demand and commands that much of a sticker price on its value. But things get worse, guys. Things get worse because in this very, very same auction, there was another comic book, Action Comics #1 from 1938, the actual first appearance of Superman that also went up for sale in a CGC 3.0 grade, and it sold for $1.5 million. Boy, $1.5 million, that is a big number. Except, did you guess it, guys? Yes, indeed. Action Comics #1, go back to a 3.0 in 2021. It sold for what? $1.638 million. So a lot less of a dip, but it did in fact sell for $100,000 less. And again, you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe, not every 3.0 is the same, but you guys know where I'm going with this. Serial number 000452 4001. Serial number 000452 4001. It is the same book. So once again, potentially this was the same owner that bought these books, because this also came from a Comic Connect auction. So it looks like they bought both this one and the Superman one in the same auction and now are in a position where they have to liquidate these two books. And unfortunately, they took a pretty massive haircut overall. Now, here was the one of the articles I just happened to find where they were talking about the sales, and even Ken Goldin, who runs Goldin Auctions, that he even said right here, out of everything we sold last night, the sports, collectibles, and the entertainment history, I think the single best buy is going to be Superman #1, said Goldin. There are only two that are in better condition than this one. I think that is a $5 million comic book. Well, the market doesn't seem to think that that book is worth $5 million. I mean, the Rocket copy sold on private, a sale for that $5 million range. The 7.0 is graded higher than the Rocket copy. So at least I understand what he's talking about, when he's talking about what potentially that book could be valued for. But at the end of the day, the floor value is the floor value. It sold for $1.6 million. And frankly, I'm sure that is still going to be a great buy for whoever it is that actually ended up buying that comic book. But the question is, when is it going to turn? Where's the floor value for these things? I thought Golden Age books were recession proof. What is going on out there in the comic book market? Does this mean that the sky is falling? Well, in this particular case, with these particular books, I think that it's probably more likely that, like every other book that we've seen out there in the market, whether it's modern, copper, bronze, silver, and even Golden Age books, even at that high level, always have the potential to be massively inflated in better economic times, right? Even at that $1 million price point. So when that book was bought in 2021, there was a lot of instances that I've talked about here on the channel before, where even Golden Age books that were repriced in 2021 have actually gotten hurt in their prior sales coming into 2023. Like there's books like the first appearance of Wonder Woman, or there's some Batman ones that have had haircuts on their values, or now in this case, Superman ones. And even in the case of the 3.0 Action one, we've seen haircuts. So a lot of books that did get sold in the Golden Age at that time are also feeling a little bit of the macroeconomic pressures now in 2023. It was the Golden Age books that didn't get repriced in 2021 or 2022, or maybe they sold, really low or didn't have eyes on, that those are the ones that are still setting those record numbers today. I mean, some of these books that go on sale regularly, especially the superhero ones of the Golden Age that are like, pretty common grails, they do have the potential to get repriced, or, at the very least trade sideways for a time. I mean, we've been talking about here on the channel, we've seen a lot of these books. And the reason, in my estimation, as to why this is happening has everything to do with monetary policy. I mean, I've talked about the macro environment, so much every time I do the index videos, which I realize everyone falls asleep while watching the index videos and nobody actually watches to the end when we get to the actual good stuff, what we're talking about. And frankly, I don't know if anyone's watching the video right now. I'm just a guy in a room talking to a camera with nobody in here. But the point remains, I will repeat it, there seems to be a strong correlation between the values of comic books and whatever is going on with the Federal Reserve and the interest rates. And we're currently in a situation where interest rates keep going up. Now, we just had our Fed meeting just, a couple days ago, where they decided to do a skip, I think, as they were calling it, which means they didn't raise it this month, but chances are in the next meeting or the meeting after that, they're going to raise it again. A lot of people have been predicting in the market that it's going to be raised maybe 2 more times, hopefully, depending on how inflation reacts. And then probably we're going to hit the pause at the end of the year or at the beginning of 2024, and then the pivot would eventually be sometime in 2024. And to me, my prediction has been it's going to be sometime after the pivot where we actually start to see, record prices once again, and that can catapult us into this, boom cycle, even outside of everything like, MCU related, even outside the movies. I think the macroeconomic factors have a lot more to do with the values of comic books and where they decide to go. And, we've been seeing it in this bear market. This is, I know comics are not like a perfect system, but they sort of behave in the way that other markets work, where, I talked about in my predictions for 2023, how this was going to be a risk-off environment, right? We were going to go risk on, risk off, and a lot of the money, a lot of the pool of money that is in the comic book collecting hobby was going to be moved to safer buys. So if we're thinking about, okay, we started with a bunch of speculative money in spec books that are MCU related, in modern books that are MCU related or modern variants or whatever, those are the first ones to go, right? Those are the first ones to tank because people are like, hey, I'm going to sell these modern variants and then I'm going to buy whatever, a Bronze Age key or a Copper Age key or a 9/8 Gambit, or I'm going to buy a Silver Age key. And the money moves to that. And then eventually those books start to tank because, we're still in tough economic times. So people are still, not as, liquid as they used to be. And they're like, oh, I'm going to sell my Silver Age keys. I'm going to sell my Bronze Age keys. I'm going to go buy one of these Golden Age books. Golden Age books never go down in value. And then the money moves to that. And then eventually, people, we're still in tough economic times. The interest rates are still going up. People still got to save money. And then we're thinking to ourselves, I got to buy a Golden Age Grail. I got to sell all my EC books and move this money to a Captain America Comics 1. I got to move it to a Superman 1. I got to get an Action 1. And they move the money from the Golden Age keys to the Golden Age Grails. And then those ones take haircuts. And then eventually, we get to a situation like this where if we're still in tough economic times, or we still have hard money policies, there's only so much, pool of money that can go into comic books. And eventually, even some of those big grails like Superman 1 and Action 1 will feel the, effects of the market pulling back because they're not inflated by the rest of the health of the comic book market. The comic book market has to have a certain amount of liquidity in it to elevate the entire floor value of the collectible hobby. And the reality is like, I say, you can't eat a comic book, you can't sleep in a comic book. So there's always going to be volatility in some of the value so long as we're in these tough economic times. But with all that being said, do I think the sky is falling? No, I don't think the sky is falling. Any given sale, any given day, I'm sure that person got an amazing deal. In fact, they probably did get an amazing deal on that Superman 1. And if they have the ability just to hold that book for the next couple years when we're in better economic times, they're going to do very well for themselves and possibly sell at that $5 million price point. It seems like the person who bought these books in 2021 maybe got caught up a little bit in the hype, kind of over leveraged, and now had to sell here in 2023 in worse times. And that's probably the worst way to do your comic book collecting or your comic book investing, if that's what you want to call it, where you bought high and now you're selling low. I mean, maybe they had to sell it to pay whatever other things they have to pay in their lives, but now seems like a terrible time to let go of some of those mega grails. Anyways, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about this news? What do you guys think about Superman 1 losing $1 million of equity? I realize that it's just one sale, but it is interesting to see that some of these Golden Age grails have also felt some of the correction of the 2023 bear market. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. See you all in the next video.